He says, if you're going to ask these 5 permanent members whether they would be willing to let go of some of their power, guess what their answer is going to be? If they are wise, the answer would be something else. If they are short-sighted, the answer would be what it is today. But what really leapt out at me is this one comment he made where he said the biggest opponent of UNSC reform is not a Western country. It certainly does look like the minister is referring to China. What are your thoughts, sir, on what the External Affairs Minister has said?
Well, thank you for having me on your show. The statement of Dr. Jaishankar is really very significant. Here he has made a very broad-based statement on India's approach to multilateral institutions today. And what is important about it is that he has pursued a realpolitik analysis rather than being dogmatic and repetitive of the earlier statements that we tend to make. Here he has really got to the crux of the problem. And he has made some very important statements in the course of his analysis, pointing out the problems as they exist and which we need to look at very carefully. For example, he has talked about that the progress has to be incremental. You cannot think about a big ticket reform. There cannot be a new San Francisco conference. So progress has to be incremental. Then progress cannot be only confined to the Security Council. It is a question of progress in various institutions because globalization has made the global structure extremely complex. And there are various multilateral institutions operating today regulating globalization. And progress has to be made in all these separately. And then he has pointed out that the groupings have to be issue-based, that you don't really have, although the world is at the political level become increasingly bipolar today, yet when it comes to reforming global institutions, then the groupings will be formed on issues and there'll be different kinds of coalitions being formed. And then, of course, he referred to the point that you referred to about Security Council reform. And here he pointed out quite correctly that the obstruction to the reform of the Security Council today comes not from the West, but from China and also Russia. One must remember also that Russia also, although it has supported India tangentially, never really very clearly, China, of course, is quite strongly opposed to it. But the fact is that the stand of both these countries is such that any proposal for reform in the Security Council will get opposed by these two countries. So one has to keep that in mind. And in this whole totality of statements, what the External Affairs Minister has pointed out is that we have to be, number one, extremely realistic about the kind of progress we can make. We should not have very high ambitions. We should move slowly, and we have to make our groupings based upon the issues as they come up.
Okay. Ambassador Sinha, focusing at the moment specifically on the issue of the long pending UNSC reform. Like I said, India has been crying itself hoarse for years now, talking about how, it's the most populous nation in the world, and for multiple reasons also given our growing contribution now, to the international community in multiple ways. We do deserve a seat at the high table. But let me ask you a direct question. You're a diplomat. I don't know how direct your answer would be, but I'm a journalist, so I can take this liberty. You made an interesting point just now. You said it's not just China. Even Russia's support has been at best tangential. But I want to ask you this. It is a well-known fact that India and Russia have a very long-standing, robust relationship, one that Dr. Jaishankar has gone out of his way to defend in the last 2 years since the Russia-Ukraine war erupted at one international forum after another, in the face of criticism from the West, especially the Western media, especially with regard to our Russian oil purchases. He has talked about how Russia is a valued friend, Russia has never hurt our interests. And of course, we've also seen how President Putin, every few weeks, praises Prime Minister Modi and his leadership, refers to him as a friend. Given that India is actually one of the handful of countries that seems to have stood by Russia and not condemned it for its invasion of Ukraine, despite all the pressures that we faced from the West. And let's not forget what happened at the G20 summit last September here in New Delhi. If there's one country that managed to actually get a unanimous adoption of a joint statement, in this case the New Delhi Declaration, where there was no reference to Russia and its aggression in Ukraine, it was India. My direct question to you, therefore, is, knowing whatever China's position may be, isn't it time India extracted its pound of flesh from Russia?
Well, exactly as the External Affairs Minister pointed out, we have to deal with all countries, and on certain issues we would make common cause with countries, on certain issues we would not. So with Russia, we make common cause on the issue of security. A lot of our defense purchases come from Russia. On certain strategic issues, we concur with Russia, but on so many others, we differ with Russia. Now, in the case of the Ukraine resolution that you talked about, India did not support Russia. India did not oppose the resolution. India merely abstained. And that was because of India's long-standing policy that on these issues, India seeks to find middle ground to see if resolutions, if there can be a resolution to the problem through peaceful means, through diplomatic
My apologies
means.
for interrupting you there, sir. While you're right that, at various UN Security Council votes, India abstained, and that itself, frankly, was seen as a sign of support for Russia. But I was actually referring to the G20 summit New Delhi Declaration that was adopted last September, where even the United States finally agreed to sign on the dotted line, and this is a joint statement that did not even make a reference of Russia in the context of the Ukraine war, did not even refer to Russia. This hadn't even happened in Bali.
Well, this was a great success of our diplomacy. We were able to cobble a resolution that was able to pass muster with the Western countries and was acceptable to Russia. Now, as I said, it was the skill of our diplomats who were engaged in drafting this, but it was essentially a compromise declaration, which both countries, there's a language that one uses in diplomatic negotiations, can you live with a resolution? Which means the West said they could live with the resolution, and Russia said they could also live with the resolution. But we must also keep in mind that this was done by these countries because they also did not want to embarrass India and see a G20 meeting that would fail on Indian soil, which was good of them. But the fact remains that the adoption of the resolution did not mean that we had found a solution to the crisis. The war continues to rage in Ukraine. So that was essentially a compromise by both sides to enable a declaration to be adopted. But the declaration had really practically no impact on the conflict, nor did it have show any direction towards which one can move to resolve the conflict.
Unfortunately, that seems to be the state of affairs as far as the UN itself is concerned. A lot of cynics seem to believe that the UN itself is a toothless body today because as we speak, there are at least two major wars going on around the world, from Russia-Ukraine, which is about to enter its third year, to the Israel-Hamas war, where thousands and thousands of people have died. And frankly, the United Nations has been able to do precious little to stop those wars or prevent the killing of innocents.